Would you like to learn the investment principles of the man who founded one of the most trusted investment companies in the world, the Vanguard Group? The same company that manages around $5.3 trillion worth of assets today. Yes, you heard that right. Not million, not even billion, a full $5.3 trillion. In this book blink, you'll discover what index funds are and why, for an average investor, they are often a smarter choice than mutual funds. But wait, did you know that Warren Buffett had so much faith in John Bogle's principles that he made a $1 million bet with a company called Protege Partners? The bet was that no hedge fund could outperform index funds in the long run. Now you might be wondering, what exactly are hedge funds and index funds? Don't worry. In this summary, we'll explain everything in simple terms. Ideas that could completely transform the way you think about investing. This might turn out to be the most important summary of your financial life. So listen carefully and with full focus. Don't allow a winner's game to turn into a loser's game. John C. Bogle. In this book, we'll learn why and how index funds consistently outperform most mutual funds. But before we start, let's understand what index funds, fund managers, and mutual funds really are. Whenever a company is launched, it needs money to grow. One way to raise that money is by selling a portion of its ownership in the form of shares. For example, if a company divides 10% of its ownership into 100,000 shares, then whoever buys those shares becomes a partial owner of the company. Naturally, people buy shares because they expect that as the company grows, the value of their shares will increase, giving them returns higher than a bank's interest rate. However, not everyone has the time or expertise to research and select the right companies. That's where fund managers come in, professionals who specialize in choosing the right companies for investment. So what does a fund manager do? They pool money from many investors and invest it across multiple companies to reduce risk. If one company's stock falls, the profits from others can balance out the loss. This pooled investment structure is called a mutual fund. Now let's talk about index funds. They work similarly to mutual funds, but with one big difference. Instead of being managed by a person's judgment, they follow a predefined set of rules. For example, in the US, there's an index called the S&P 500. An S&P 500 index fund invests automatically in the top 500 US companies according to their market capitalization. Similarly, in India, the Nifty 50 index represents the top 50 Indian companies, and an index fund invests in them based on their market value. See? It's not that hard to understand. John Bogle believed that, in the long run, no mutual fund can outperform index funds. That's why he advised that every ordinary investor should put their money in index funds. A parable. Once upon a time, there was a very wealthy family called the Gottschalks. They owned all the shares in the entire American stock market. Whenever a new company issued shares, the Gottschalks family would immediately invest in it. Gradually, their wealth kept growing. Every family member was happy, prosperous, and carefree. But after some time, a few family members started listening to experts. These experts said, if you sell some of your shares to your cousins and instead buy shares of a few new companies, your profits could increase even more. At first, this sounded like a great idea, so they did it, sold some shares, bought others. But the result was the opposite. Instead of increasing, their returns started to fall. Why? Because these so-called experts charged a commission every time they gave advice. Slowly, the family realized that their profits were being eaten away by fees and charges. Then they thought, maybe we need even smarter experts. So they hired more managers. But this only made things worse. Each manager charged a fee, every trade cost a commission, and every piece of advice came with a charge. Soon, these managers began buying and selling shares unnecessarily, just to earn more commission for themselves. And who suffered? The Gottschalks family. Their real returns kept shrinking. Finally, they realized, the more we try to act smart, the further we move away from real profits. So they decided to go back to their original simple approach, investing directly across all American companies. Now, whenever companies earned profits, the Gottschalks family earned along with them in the same proportion. That's exactly the message John Bogle wanted to give. If an ordinary person invests steadily and simply in their country's index funds, meaning in their nation's top companies, and holds those investments for the long term, that is true wisdom. That's where real growth begins. Market behavior. Now let's talk about why stock prices actually go up and down. According to John Bogle, there are two main reasons: the company's real earnings, people's emotions. When a company's earnings increase, its share price generally rises. And when earnings fall, the share price also drops. That's logical. But in reality, stock prices don't move only because of earnings. They also move because of people's hopes and fears. Sometimes hope pushes stock prices sky high, and sometimes fear drags them down to the ground. This is measured by the P/E ratio, the price to earnings ratio. For example, let's say you invest 100 rupees in a company, and by the end of the year, that company earns 5 rupees for you. Then the PE ratio is 100 divided by 5 equals 20. That means people are willing to pay 20 rupees for every 1 rupee of the company's earnings. If the P/E rises to 50, it means investors have strong confidence in the company. They believe it will perform exceptionally well in the future. But if the P/E falls, it means investor confidence has dropped, and people don't want to invest in that company anymore. So it's clear. Stock prices are driven by two forces: the company's real performance and human emotions. But John Bogle said, in the long run, it's not emotions but earnings that matter. How most investors turn a winner's game into a loser's game. John Bogle says, if we combine the returns of all investors in a country, the average will always equal the market's average return. But the difference begins when some people hand over their investments to fund managers, because then they don't just get the market's return, they also have to pay commissions and management fees to those managers. And the more they pay in fees, the less real return they actually get. Let's understand this with a simple example. Imagine a stock market that fluctuates, sometimes high, sometimes low, but over the long run, it gives an average return of 8% per year. Now suppose a person starts investing at the age of 22 and continues until 65. That's nearly 50 years of investing. And let's be honest, most of us save for the long term anyway, so let's assume he chose the market instead of a bank. If he earns 8% per year, his money will grow beautifully over time. But if he invests through a mutual fund, the fund manager will charge around 2.5% per year as a management fee. So his actual return becomes 8% minus 2.5% equals 5.5% per year. Now, look at the difference this small number makes. If he invests 1 lakh rupees once and lets it grow for 50 years at 5.5%, he'll end up with around 14 lakh rupees. But if that same money had been invested directly at 8%, it would grow to about 46 lakh rupees. That's a 300% higher return, without any expert help. Just think, a mere 2.5% difference in fees turned into a massive gap in long-term wealth. That's why Bogle says, fees look small, but their impact is enormous. Taxes are costs, too. There's a famous saying in the world of investing: the more the motion, the less the return. Meaning, the more you move your money around, buying, selling, or withdrawing, and the more tax you'll pay. And taxes ultimately are just another cost that eats away your return. Now consider this. Actively managed funds are constantly buying and selling stocks, sometimes in new companies, sometimes selling the old ones. And every transaction brings a tax cost. But index funds don't work like that. They simply invest in the top companies of an index, like Nifty 50 or S&P 500, and hold them for years. Since trading is minimal, taxes are also minimal. John Bogle gives a fascinating comparison. Over the past 25 years, the average mutual fund, equity fund return was 10%, while the S&P 500 index fund returned 12.3%. Because mutual funds trade frequently, investors paid around 1.5% in taxes, so their net return dropped to 10 minus 1.5 equals 8.5%. Meanwhile, in the S&P 500 index fund, tax impact was only about 0.6% because shares were rarely traded. So the net return stayed at 12.3 minus 0.6 equals 11.7%. Now look at the result. If someone invested 1 lakh rupees for 25 years in a mutual fund, they'd end up with about 6,17,000 rupees. But in an index fund, that same money would grow to around 14.9 lakh rupees. In short, due to fees and taxes alone, mutual fund investors earned 8.37 lakh rupees less. John's simple message is, more trading, more taxes, less profit. If you invest simply for the long term in low-cost index funds, the market will always remain a winner's game for you. Selecting long-term winners. Now let's talk about the real question. Where should we actually invest our money? John Bogle says, don't look for the needle, buy the haystack. In other words, don't waste your time searching for one winning stock. Instead, buy the entire haystack. The whole market itself. In stock market terms, that means if we keep trying to find which specific company will outperform the market index, we're playing a loser's game. Instead, the smarter move is to invest directly in the companies that are already part of the index. In other words, just buy the index fund itself. Bogle shares a fascinating piece of data to prove this point. Over the past 36 years, a total of over 355 new mutual funds were launched. But guess what? 223 of them shut down. That means over 2/3 of those funds couldn't even survive. And among the ones that did survive, 60 performed poorly, 48 performed roughly at the same level as the index fund, and only 24 managed to outperform the index fund. Now, hearing 24 winners might sound good, but the reality runs deeper. Most of those 24 funds did well, only in their early years, when their fund size was still small. As Warren Buffett once said, a fat wallet is the enemy of superior returns. Meaning, once the fund grows too big, decision-making becomes cautious, bloated, and returns start to decline. So, in the long run, only 3 funds out of the original 355 neither shut down nor fell behind the index fund. That's less than 1% of mutual funds that actually beat the index fund. Now think about it. If 99% of funds lose, doesn't common sense tell us to invest in the one option that beats them all, the index fund itself? Why search for a needle in the haystack when you can own the entire haystack? That's real intelligence. Think of it this way. When you roll a dice, the chance of any specific number showing up is 1 in 6 or about 16.6%. But the chance of beating the index fund is less than 1%. So you tell me, which game sounds smarter to play? Focus on the lowest cost funds. Now that we understand most funds fail to outperform the index, there's another key lesson. Cost matters. If you invest through an expert or fund manager, you'll always have to pay fees, and those fees directly cut into your returns. Every mutual fund carries a cost called the expense ratio, the fee charged for managing, promoting, and running the fund. For regular mutual funds, this ratio usually ranges from 1% to 2%, but for ACHA index funds, it's around 0.1%, a tiny fraction. In the long run, the equation is simple. Greater than lower costs equals higher returns. And that's exactly what John Bogle kept reminding investors. Greater than spend less, earn more.